right. Well, good morning, everyone, or whatever time it is where you are and where you're listening from. This is Read, Right, and Wrong, an author chat show where we discuss everything we've read, we're writing, and what's wrong with it all. This is our first episode, and I'm really excited about it. I'm your host. My name is Robert Martin, and today I'm talking all things books with an up and coming author, Brenda Lyne, who is about to release her debut novel, Charlie's Mirror, on December 8th. Brenda, welcome.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
Very happy to have you. I'm very honored to have you as my first guest. This should be fun.
Yes, looking forward to it. Thanks.
Awesome. All right. Well, the dreaded question that I think everyone fears. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. I am a native Minnesotan, born and raised just north of Minneapolis, Minnesota. I am. I have I've had a 20-year marketing and communications career in the corporate sphere. But in my heart, I've always wanted to be a fiction novelist. And so, like I said, long career, couple of kids, and finally decided the time is right. It is never too late to make your dream come true. And so that's what I'm doing. And very, very excited to see my first book hit the market in early December. So it's literally a dream come true for me.
Oh, that's awesome. That's fantastic. And I want to say your accent doesn't give you away at all.
I don't sound like I'm straight out of Fargo. I'm pretty sure I do, but that's okay.
I love it. I love it. All right. Well, let's dive into our first segment. This is called Recent Readings. It is the read part of our show. So, Brenda, what just recently made its way from the nightstand to a permanent home on your bookshelf?
So, like I said, I am a Minnesota girl born and raised, and I have an affinity for local authors. And PJ Tracy is among the more recent local authors that I've discovered. John Sanford is another one that I'm very fond of. And when I decided to dip my toe into finally writing that book and getting it published, my dad, who is very excited about this, has kind of been doing the same thing. And he happened to be at a bookstore one day, and he found, or there was an author there, a local self-published author who was doing a book signing. And so he picked it up. It's a fellow by the name of Chris Norbury, and his second novel, Straight River, was the one that he was signing that day. So my dad picked up a copy and he gave it to me, and I was able to. He got it signed, of course. So I have a signed first edition. That's always very exciting. And so it was my pleasure to read it, and it turned out to be exactly the kind of book that I like to read: a mystery,
Oh,
a
nice.
crime, a crime novel. It's the same kind of stuff I like to write. And so, it was really very well paced, very exciting book, and by a local author who's in the same boat as me, and just that was just really really fun for me.
Oh, that's fantastic. We've got to get you to do a book signing of your new book there.
Oh, that'd be great.
And aren't dads great? I mean, don't you love that
Yes,
they have the eye, they're looking for stuff. They've always got always looking for the next great gift. So
yes,
fantastic to dad. And
exactly.
and so you said he's really excited about this book. That's great.
Yeah, he really really is. He's my my biggest supporter, and he's really doing his best to get the word out there for me
Oh,
with
that's
family
awesome.
and friends and things like that. So I really really appreciate him.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. Yeah, so we send out these pre-interview surveys, and I noticed that you mentioned in some of the questions that we asked you, your dad was your first beta reader for your upcoming book. Is that right?
That is right. Yes.
Oh, that's fantastic. And what were his completely unbiased reviews?
Without any bias at all. He told me it was a fantastic book, and it was, just very fast paced, and it edge of his seat, and kept him, hard to put it down. And of course, I take him at face value, right? No
Of
bias, like you said.
course. Yeah, you heard it here first, folks. That's
That's right.
the first official review. That needs to go on the book jacket for sure.
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
fantastic. Um, All right, so I personally am a latecomer when it comes to mainstream trends. I have always been and always will be, um, you know, a little behind the times. And one book that I recently discovered during my quarantine book club, when I've been a part of so many book clubs over the years, but when COVID and the pandemic started, I started a virtual quarantine book club. But one book that we just read that everybody had been telling me, um, for I guess 2 years now that I just had to read. It's so amazing. Was Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. Um, I'm not one who likes to jump on the bandwagon, but that was a good one. Have you read that by chance?
I have not.
Oh,
I also
highly
used to be
recommend.
a okay. Well, I will add that to my list. I used to be on part of a book club too, and it sounds exactly like something that group would have read. It did unfortunately disband, so I'm gonna have to find another one and make that the book that we
Yep,
read.
I love it. Now,
Yeah.
are there
Okay.
any books though that you have recently discovered or any books at any point that you read maybe a few years after everyone else that you've just loved?
Yes. So that like you, Robert, I am also tend to be kind of a latecomer to, the biggest, hottest things in books. So when I discovered the Twilight series, now this was
Oh,
a few years ago, but when that was all the rage in young adult,
yep.
probably 10 years ago.
Yep.
And people had kind of moved away from it by the time I found it. And I'll tell you what, I blasted through that entire series in record time. It just sucked me right in, and I'm still a fan. And go Team Jacob, and
I was gonna
and
ask, so good for you for going on ahead and plugging that.
yeah, right, Team Jacob.
That's
And
great.
and so I just thought it was very well done and good storytelling. I did not, however, think that the movie was as good as the book, but then again, I
Really?
never do. So
Well,
yeah.
I mean, that's kind of like, that's kind of common, a common theme among authors, right? And I think among
Yeah.
among heavy readers too. I'll tell you one since we have mentioned this, one thing and it's not a movie, it's a television series that has been made from a book, that I think the television series outshined the book,
Hmm,
was Little Fires Everywhere.
okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you've read it, but the TV show, the book, came out in what, the late '90s, early 2000s, and it was very popular. But the TV show really did a great job of keeping the story in the late '90s, early
Oh, okay.
2000s. But during the late '90s and early 2000s, I don't, race and racism wasn't something that we were all talking about as much.
Right.
Um, it was still there, and we all knew it was still there. But the series does a really great job of kind of bringing that situation, that topic, to the forefront, um, and really just kind of saying, like, we're going to talk about this, and it puts it in the context of the '90s, and it really, I think it does a really good job. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, again, guilty pile on the list, but have not gotten to it yet. But I have
that's
heard
great.
wonderful things both about the book and about the miniseries.
Yeah,
So
it's odd. I'll say this, and I've never said this about anything before. Watch the series first.
okay.
Yep, watch
All
the
right.
series
I will give it a
first.
shot.
All
Okay.
right. All right. So historically, like, just over, I mean, and this can go back as far as you want it to go. What are some of your favorite books? Now, I know it's mean to ask an author to list just one. So
Yes.
I I kind of open that up to a few. What are some of your favorites?
Okay. So I am a lifelong Stephen King fan. So it would just be wrong of me not to put in a plug for him. He's a genius, if you ask me, and my hero. And his book It is my all-time favorite novel, followed closely
Interesting.
by his book Bag of Bones, which I think is probably his most underrated
Hmm.
book. They did A&E did a miniseries on Bag of Bones a few years ago, and I just didn't think it hit the mark, but I appreciated the effort.
Okay.
Then in terms outside of the Stephen King realm, Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code is one of
Yes.
my all-time favorite books.
Oh, the way
And
he
a lot of
unfolds
people,
that story. Oh
oh
my goodness.
man, it
Masterful.
just really was and really impactful. And I found myself after I read it, kind of going back and thinking about everything I had learned as a Christian,
Yep.
and just kind of how that just really turned all of that on its ear. I
Yeah.
really, really appreciated the Da Vinci Code. And then in the nonfiction, I'm not super into nonfiction, but I will read the occasional. And Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil by
Hmm.
John Berendt
Uh-huh.
is one of my favorites. And in fact, I happened to visit Savannah, Georgia, while I was reading that book, so
Oh
it was
wow.
really, really fun to see, like actually put on visual where the events of this book happened. Like, this is the house, this is the house, and this is the bench, and Savannah is a beautiful city anyway.
Yeah.
So really kind of helped to paint that picture even more clearly for me and more brightly. So
Yeah.
I'd say those are probably among two of my more favorite books outside of the Stephen King realm.
Okay. It's funny you mentioned Stephen King. I he is also one of my favorite authors. Um, but when I was about 17 years old, I got the chance to take a family vacation up to Maine.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom and I one day went walking through Portland, and we found this small bookshop, and we found a first edition copy of Salem's Lot,
Oh,
which I read on that trip and has since
okay.
become one of my favorites.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, and it's I
Yeah,
think it's very underrated as well. It didn't.
agreed.
Yeah, I mean, it was published in 1975, and it did not get the treatment like, you know, Carrie or Shawshank Redemption, or you know,
Right.
you know, did not get all of the film treatment, and or really the notoriety that the others did, but it was fantastic. And
Yep.
then my mom saw me, blow through that book in, 12 hours and then read it again the next
Mhm.
day. So she looked up information and found that his home is in Portland, Maine. And so we got to go and walk by his home. And I don't know if you've been there, but he has this wrought iron fence outside his home, and on it are all these bats and spiders, and it's so cool. It's so
Yep.
spooky.
Yep. Yep. I actually did visit Portland, Maine just last year.
Oh
Finally,
wow.
that was a bucket list item for me. And of course, you know I'm gonna go visit Stephen King's house. I'm gonna. And
Absolutely.
so,
Yeah,
yeah, so I dragged my friend over there, and yeah, the wrought iron fence and just the gothic, mythical look and
I
feel of the
know.
place is just so Stephen King.
Oh my goodness. That
Mm-hmm.
and that's somewhere I'd love to visit again. But I love that he kind of finds a place and sticks to it, and he writes
Right.
a lot of what he writes is, right there in Maine, and I love it. I think it's
Yep.
fantastic.
I agree. You write what you know, right?
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
that's, the Charlie's Mirror is based in Madison, Wisconsin. Now,
Mm,
while I don't live there now, I did go to college there. And so,
yeah.
I wrote what I knew, and
Yeah.
probably any future novels will be set here in Minnesota
There you
because
go.
it's what I know. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's an interesting. I think that you can tell when authors are writing about something that they know or have experienced, or that or a setting that they've visited, because the way that they describe it is completely different than someone who's kind of just making it up as they go.
Yes, I've
It's
noticed
so
that too.
rich. It's just so
Hmm.
rich.
Yes.
All right, so I heard some, some big titles in there when we were talking about your favorite books. What about an underrated book, like an under or like something that people might not have heard about?
If you haven't read, to your listeners, I would say, if you haven't read Steve Thayer's The Weatherman, I
Hmm.
would recommend that one. That one's probably 15 years old now. But its main character is a guy who lost his face and I believe he was fighting overseas, and it was a war injury. And so, just the main character who doesn't have a face and has to figure out how to live life and do his job as a meteorologist that way, is just absolutely fascinating. And again, of course, it's a crime and mystery book,
Okay.
but or story, but that but the um, the issues that the main character has to confront because of his injury, or it just really adds something to the story. So that would be
Okay.
my recommendation.
All right. Nice. All right. Let's jump ahead to our next segment. Writing away. So you
Mhm.
have a new book coming out soon, and I am personally very excited about it. And I think this also speaks to my uh, Stephen King liking, because
Mhm.
I find that I mean, you definitely have your own style. Don't get me wrong, but I do feel like um the way that you unfold things and the way that you build your characters and your settings reminds me a lot of him. So tell us a little bit about Charlie's Mirror.
All right. Well, first I want to thank you, because that is the greatest compliment that I could ever ask for.
Absolutely, I mean
Because
it.
he does very heavily influence me. I've read every one of his books. I have all of them all of them in hardcover as a collection, and I just think he is a brilliant storyteller. And
Mhm.
to have you say that my writing reminds you of him, it's absolutely, I love that. Thank you. Um,
Absolutely.
i- in terms of Charlie, Charlie is the very first novel I've ever completed. And the idea for Charlie, came to me while I was a student at the University of Wisconsin. And I've always been kind of, I've always had a thing for history and cemeteries and learning stories. And
Mhm.
the University of Wisconsin is an old college. It's an old university. It's been around since the mid 1850s. And so that a lot has happened there, and things have changed so much. And I remember thinking to myself, what would it be like to see, this campus 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 20 years ago, because a lot changes even in 20 years. And so that's really where the seed of Charlie was planted. And that was back in 1997. So that just tells you how long it's taken me to get to making my dreams come true. um, and But the story, evolved over time, and and really just it just kind of rolled around in my head and grew over these last, how long has it been, 23 years, 22 years, and until I finally made the decision, the only way this book is going to get written is if I sit down and write it. It turns out these things don't write themselves.
Funny how that
And
works, right?
it really is. And when I did, but what's interesting though, Robert, is when I did sit down and start writing, it fell out of me. I
Wow.
probably wrote the first draft in 2 months, because it was ready.
Really?
It was
Wow.
done marinating. It was ready. So so that was really
Wow.
fun. And pretty much every spare moment I had, I was writing. If I wasn't sleeping or following running around with my kids, I was writing.
Wow.
And it was really fun to see it come to life. And then I went into it thinking I knew what was going to happen from beginning to end, but it turns out that things happen that you don't expect.
Mhm.
When you're writing, at least for me, sometimes the character decides themselves what's going to happen, and before I know it, I've got a whole chapter that I hadn't planned written, but it's awesome and I need it,
Yeah.
and it's just amazing to me. The whole process was just it was really creative and cathartic and interesting, and I learned a lot about myself while I was writing this book. So
Wow.
it's just really fun.
Yeah, I I I write a lot of plays
Okay.
currently, and I always have between 2 and 222 play ideas, script
Yes.
ideas in my head. Um, and my most recent one that was published is called Lithium and Xanax and All of My Friends, and um, I I had a similar experience, where I built this thing up in my head, but I'll tell you, that thing poured out of me in one night.
Yeah.
I got home one night, and it was about 6 o'clock. This was pre-COVID and everything. Um, but I got home from work one night. It's about 6 o'clock, and I sat down at the computer and I wrote this thing until 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting how these stories just kind of build up in your head, and you work everything out beforehand, and then it just happens, you
Yep.
know? And so I
Yep.
think
Sure
that's
makes it
awesome.
easy. Yep.
Right?
When you take the time
Yeah.
to let it build in your head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
All you're doing then is just transcribing, right?
oh, that's I've never thought of it that way, but you're absolutely right. You're absolutely
Hmm.
right. So let's talk some inspirations. We've already, of course, mentioned Stephen King. But I want to talk about the story of Charlie's Mirror because I cannot help but connect it to one of my favorites from Stephen King, 11/22/63.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
talk to me about the story of Charlie's Mirror.
Okay. So the story, the time travel element and the well, let me go back to the beginning. So talking about Charlie's Mirrors, a story of a woman in 2019 who gets the opportunity to travel back in time to stop a horrific tragedy and save numerous lives. In this case, the tragedy is a bombing and suicide bombing. And she when we first meet her in 2019, she is lonely. She is really reclusive, kind of paranoid. Her only companion is her cat, and and she has one coworker that she has kind of a tenuous relationship. He wants to date her, and she's all like, no, that's scary.
Mhm.
Just really, she's
Yeah.
just lived through a really difficult childhood and just is content to stay in her bubble.
And
And
for the listeners, that
yes.
character is crazy dynamic. I The way that you built that character throughout, I mean, it gives me chills sometimes because I feel like I know this character. So I have to say, hats off to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Her name is Sarah, by the way.
Yeah.
And probably should give her a name. And so she escapes a bad childhood in Minneapolis and moves to Madison, Wisconsin. So she's already past the college phase and she's being an adult. And after jumping around between rental situations for that first decade in Madison, she finally buys her own home nearby, near the campus, where it's urban and it's just kind of furry and rusty and just a um, really great environment for her and her cat. After she moves in, she notices this abandoned house next door and is very soon kind of beckoned over there. And she goes and checks it out, and it appears to have been abandoned for years and years and years. Um, and it is in that house that she falls into a mirror and wakes up in 1989 as a
Mm,
college student in the
mhm,
dorm in
mm.
1989. And so from there, she needs to figure out A, how she got there, B, what she's doing there, and C, how in the heck she's going to get home.
Yep.
And so really that is the majority of the story. She learned about the bombing shortly before she ended up in 1989. So she knows about it, and
Mhm.
it eventually she figures out that that's why she's there, to stop this bombing. And
Sure.
then the race is on to figure out who that bomber is
Mhm.
before it happens and stop it.
Yeah. And the whole story kind of centers around this bombing. I know Stephen King's book centers around the JFK assassination.
Hmm.
This one centers around this library mall bombing. Now, was that real? Is that a real event, or is that something that you came up with? And
100% a figment of my imagination.
okay,
Although it is, I guess, loosely inspired by a bombing that did happen on the University of Wisconsin campus back in 1971, I want to
oh,
say, 70,
interesting.
71. That was a war protest, and
Mm,
it caused a lot of damage to one of the academic buildings on campus and killed one person. So Madison does have a history,
sure.
but this particular bombing is not part of it.
Okay,
No, that was just me making up something that Sarah needs to go back and stop.
gotcha. Well, I mean, the reason I have to ask is because it felt real. And I mean, obviously, like you said, it's Madison has a history there. But really around the world, we have a history with that. So,
Right.
um, now your favorite character in the book, I'm gonna assume it's Sarah, but I'm gonna leave that open ended for you.
Yes, I have a good relationship with Sarah. I
Hmm.
do. It's really fun to watch her grow and evolve through the story, because she at the end she's a lot different than she is at the
Mm,
beginning. She learns a lot about herself and learns to trust, and that's really a key element to this story.
sure.
But somebody else undergoes a transformation as well, and that is a fellow by the name of Charlie Anderson,
Mm,
who is he's not bad. He's not a bad guy. He's
yeah.
just misunderstood.
Yep.
And he also, has difficult times in his life, and he finds it very difficult to cope with them. And his solution is one that's going to cause a lot of death and destruction if Sarah can't figure out a way to connect with him. I
Yeah.
think Charlie, the only meaningful relationship in Charlie's life is with his dead grandmother. So he's got that going for him too.
Oh, okay. So just throwing that in there just as a little
Yeah,
nugget for the listeners.
yeah,
Got
right.
it. Uh-huh.
Let's just say that this relationship definitely has an impact on Charlie's mental well-being as well, and
Uh,
that's another element of the story.
yes, it certainly does. Yes, it certainly does. So obviously we've talked about the completely 100% totally unbiased reviews that
Yes.
you've received from your first beta reader, but what has the response been from others so far?
Well, only a handful of people have read it so far.
Sure.
I've kept it pretty well under wraps because building the suspense, right? Building
Yep.
the anticipation. But the few people who have read it, I've really gotten nothing but positive reviews. My dad's completely unbiased opinion that it's a fast-paced story, keeps you on the end of your seat, has been echoed by everybody else who's read it too. Just I can't put this down. This is great, and poor Charlie and poor Sarah, and oh my gosh, I can't
Sure.
believe this happened, and just nothing but good, nothing but
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. I mean, and I echo that. I echo that as well. Um I, of course, I feel like we could talk about this book all day. And I have so many questions about it, but I don't want to spoil the the twist at the end. The fun little twist at the end. Um so I'm not going to ask any more any more
Okay.
questions about the story. But I do want to know, what do you hope that your readers get out of this book when they read those final few pages and their jaws drop to the floor like mine did? What do you want them to walk away knowing or feeling?
I want them to walk away feeling like maybe they can be a little bit braver in their own lives,
Hmm.
and confront whatever it is that's holding them back, and feel a little bit more comfortable stretching and learning a little bit more about themselves so that they can make positive impacts on their own lives.
Hmm.
Both Sarah and Charlie had the opportunity to do that, and they did it. And if one person reads this book and says, you know what, I can I don't have to be held hostage by this bad thing in my life. I'm going to confront it and I'm going to move on. Then
Hmm.
I'll feel like I've succeeded.
Sure. And I think that that's a very very realistic goal there.
Awesome.
Just knowing it, I think you're gonna reach a lot of people with this. So what's next for you? I mean, you mentioned in there it took you 22 years to write this one. Are we
Mhm.
gonna have to wait 22 years for the next great Brenda Lynn novel?
Hey, good news. The next great Brenda Lyne novel is almost done.
I love
It's
it. Happy
another one
camp.
that is, been rolling around in my head for 20 years instead of
Okay.
22. If this one though, this one's been a little bit more of a labor of love.
Okay.
The story has, the basic elements of the story have always been there, but I found this one a little bit more difficult to find the right way to tell it,
Okay.
from which character's point of view. So it's undergone a couple of rewrites and has
Okay.
taken me about a year to actually commit to paper.
Okay.
Um, Good news is though that part's done, and I'm just going through and doing final edits right now.
That's
This
great.
one's a ghost story, and you're going to see,
Ooh.
a lot. You're going to again see Stephen King influence throughout this thing
Sure.
because I just can't help myself. But it's a great story, and my beta readers are absolutely loving it. So
Oh,
I
I
can't wait.
cannot wait.
Hmm.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Excellent, excellent.
All right. Well, this is going to bring us to our final segment, which I call All the Wrongs. So let's get candid here.
Okay.
First off, we're going to start with authors and other books. What is one book that you just could not get into that everyone else said you had to read and would love?
50 Shades of Grey. I
I
was
was
not
hoping
impressed.
that I would have at least one guest that would say that in the course
Yeah.
of this, and I'm glad it was my first.
Yeah, no, I made it about 6 pages in, and I did not see what all the hype was about, and I just wasn't impressed,
Sure.
and if it doesn't hook me and if it's not something that I'm gonna love, I'm not gonna spend my time, you know what I
Yep.
mean?
I made it less than 6. Let me tell you that.
Okay. Okay, well, it's not just me then.
And I feel like I wasted so much money because my friend told me that I would love the whole series, so I bought all of them at once, stupidly.
Oh boy. Yeah.
And I have no disrespect for Kindles or people that read on e-reader, but I love paper.
Yep.
So I always buy the book. And so yeah, those got sold at the used bookstore the next day.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
But at
Now,
least you can say you gave it a try, right?
yeah,
Just to see
exactly.
what all the hype was about, right?
Exactly. For me though, the one that I just could not get into was Crazy Rich Asians. I don't know if you've
I
read
have
it.
not read that, but I've heard that from others that it was
Yeah.
another one that was difficult
Now
to get
I
into.
loved the movie. I got to watch
Mhm.
it on a plane. It was pretty much the only movie that this airline had
Okay.
that looked remotely watchable or that was in English. Um,
Right.
and so for a 9-hour flight, I figured I'd give it a go uh, 3 times. So
Yeah. Wow.
no, but I loved the movie, but the book just didn't do it for me. Just
Yeah.
did not do it for me.
Yep. I understand that.
Yep. All right, so let's talk about you as an author. Any instances where you got it wrong?
Well, this second book that I've been working on, I got it wrong a couple of times. There was one of my first draft. I made it probably 150 pages in
Okay.
when I got absolutely stuck.
Really?
I could not see a way forward for this
Mm,
story. I knew what I wanted it to do, but it wasn't doing it. Wouldn't do it. And so I had to take a step back and really take um, another look at it from the point of view of, maybe the way I think this is going to work isn't right.
Mhm.
Maybe I got to start all over and look at it from a different point of view. And that's exactly what I did. And so I basically had to start all over, 150 plus pages in,
Mm.
and and it was, but it ended up being the right thing to do. So I can't even be mad about it.
And isn't that a humbling experience when you get
Yes.
so far into it and then you just have to say, "You know what? I'm not I'm not great with this," like this
Yeah.
is not it.
This is
Um,
terrible. And
yeah.
so I got to be objective. I got to objectively look at my baby
Yeah.
and think of a different way to do it.
Yeah.
And it's not easy, but like I said, it needed to be, that's what needed to happen. So,
Yeah.
and now it's even better. So I can't even
There
complain.
you go.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've in my own writing adventures, um I have started writing so many different, different plays or poems or I even have, I'd say, about a dozen unfinished novels out there.
Mhm.
I feel like every November I get that NaNoWriMo fever,
Yes.
and then usually at about, and I'm going strong this year. I'm really going for it this year. Um,
Awesome.
but I usually get to about November 7th or 8th, and I kind of fall off fall off the earth a little bit.
Yeah.
But no, this year I'm going strong. But in the past, I mean, I've got so many that just sit there because I think I'm going in the right direction, and it was just oh so wrong.
Yeah. Right. And
So
it's hard to,
yeah,
to take that different tack and look at it from a different angle and
yep,
figure out a different way to do it. That's hard work, because then
yeah,
you got to start over, and
absolutely.
that's hard too. So I
Yeah, and then
completely
how do you
understand.
keep the work fresh when you've already written it
Exactly.
once, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, I must say, bravo to you for taking on the task of, scrapping 150 pages of work and starting over. And now, now look at you. You've got a near finished version that your
Yeah.
beta readers are loving. I mean, this is exciting. That's very exciting.
Yes. Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
excited.
So, what about reviewers? Have you had any bad reviews? And how do
No,
you deal with that?
I haven't had any, at least not in terms of my book,
Mhm.
in terms of Charlie yet. I fully expect that, every review that Charlie gets once it hits the market isn't going to be good,
Sure.
um, because you're never going to make everybody happy. But the good
Yeah.
news is, that 20 years of corporate experience I was talking about, that
Yep.
has thickened my skin and
Mhm.
taught me, that, how to take criticism, and how
Yeah.
to, you know, um, sometimes you can make it actionable and sometimes you can't, and figure out what that looks like. So I'm
Yeah.
really not too worried about receiving
Great.
negative reviews. I just hope that more will be positive than negative.
Of course. Of course. And
Hmm.
I don't think that's going to be a problem for you, personally. But, one thing that I have noticed here lately, um I think with the rise of connectivity and everyone being able to access anything at any moment, um I think we're seeing a lot of internet trolls, like
Yes.
people that just want to cause damage and destruction just to cause damage and destruction.
Yep.
At the beginning of the pandemic, we had the all of that. Everybody jumped onto Zoom, right? And so at the beginning, you had these Zoom bombers that would come into Zoom meetings and just spew hate on people, you know.
Right.
And so I'm noticing a lot. I'm a part of a lot of these author Facebook groups, these author chat Facebook groups, and I'm noticing a lot of people who are getting these kind of like review bombers on their
Hmm.
stuff. They go and they do a 1 star and they say, poorly written, bad grammar, and you're like, okay, I mean, you
Yeah.
chose the least, the easiest remark that you could come up with, negative remark that you could come up with, and you're calling it fact. So
Right.
I mean, I think everybody has to, give something a chance,
Yes, I agree. And trolls are an unfortunate reality on the
Yeah.
internet, anywhere, whether it be social media, book review sites, Amazon, but anything, anywhere that a keyboard warrior can provide their opinion or lack thereof. It's just a reality, and
Yep.
I think the more you can accept that and understand it, I think the better off you're going to be. And that goes for everybody, not just writers,
Yep.
everybody.
I agree. I
Mhm.
agree. Well, Brenda, it has been wonderful talking to you. Truly a pleasure. Um,
Likewise, thank you.
I'm absolutely thank you, and I'm so excited to see your book released. I cannot
Me
wait for
too.
everyone to read it. Folks, you can get her book direct from the publisher at citylimitspublishing.com or at all major online retailers, and you will find it on shelves in Barnes and Noble. Check out the publisher's website, citylimitspublishing.com, where you can get a full list of online and in-store retailers. Again, this book is releasing December 8th of 2020, but you can pre-order today. Brenda, thank you so much. Any final thoughts for our listeners?
Um, just one final thought. It makes a perfect holiday gift. It fits right in a stocking.
Doesn't it? I think
It
that's
does.
right.
Yes. So
And who
thank you very much.
absolutely, and who wouldn't love to receive a good book to read in that week between Christmas and New Year's, where we're all
Yeah,
just kind
can't
of,
think of anybody.
yep,
Yes.
I know. All right. Well, thank you all for listening. I'm Robert Martin, and this is Read, Right, and Wrong.